I'm going to tell you a story you've never heard before because no one knows this story the way I know it. It takes place the night of June 12, 1994, and it concerns the murders of my ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, and her young friend, Goldman. Forget everything you think you know about that night because I know the facts better than anyone. The story you know or think you know, that's not the story, not even close. This is one story the whole world got wrong.
Hey everyone, welcome back, and good morning to everyone except for OJ. OJ has passed away as of April 10th of 2024, and not a lot of people are grieving his passing. Despite being hailed as one of the most exceptional runner backs in NFL history, OJ Simpson's reputation was marred by numerous controversies, most notably his involvement in the 1994 murder trial of his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, and her friend Ronald Goldman. Orenthal James Simpson, better known as OJ Simpson, was born July 9th of 1947 in San Francisco, California. By 1952, OJ's parents had separated. Jimmy, OJ's father, left the family when OJ was just age 4. No reason was offered at the time. The 4 Simpson children were raised by OJ's mother, Eunice Simpson, but later it would come out that his father, Jimmy, was a drag queen in San Francisco. Jimmy would later perish from AIDS in 1986. Now, later as an adult in 1974, prior to his father's death, OJ would make a statement. Except for the holidays, when I was growing up, I rarely saw my father. I resented his absence, especially when I became a teenager and was trying to find out who I was. I really needed a man around for guidance. I get along with my father now, but it's taken years for me to come to terms with my feelings. By 1985, OJ was admitted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but his story then kind of tilted. It changed a bit, and he talked about the pain that he faced as if it was more normalized. Now, what do you say about your dad, you know? There are people, they're raised in broken homes. Even though my dad didn't live under the same roof as us, he was always there. I always had a father, and I love you for it. Okay then, that was a quick turnaround. Besides the struggle of feeling the way that he did about his father and the separation, one more thing to note in his childhood. He was a hell of a troublemaker by age 13. He became a member of the gang known as Persian Warriors. That definitely sounds like a 13-year-old gang. The Persian Warriors. A brawl led to his stay at the San Francisco Youth Guidance Center for almost a week in 1962. But regarding his father and how OJ really felt about his father, Jimmy, this would create some issues in OJ's future relationships. It really shaped OJ to be homophobic. OJ's successes would eventually be overshadowed by the horrific crimes he would commit, and the one infamous crime that he was acquitted of regarding Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. It's unsettling because even though OJ was raised poorly amongst his siblings and, his grades were a little bit not that great, he went from just existing and surviving to thriving and going down in history as one of the best athletes the world would ever see. During this time, OJ married Marguerite L. Whitley on June 24th, 1967, which lasted 11 years. OJ had initially been set up with Marguerite back in high school, as one of his former buddies had dated her first. The buddy's name was Al Cowlings. Al, now just remember Al, okay? Because Al would be the guy that leads police on in this really big, infamous chase later in life. But we'll get there in a minute. Al quit seeing Marguerite, and OJ, he stepped in. The couple welcomed 3 children into the world: Arnell, Jason, and Aaron. Tragically, their daughter Erin passed away at the age of 2 after drowning in the family's swimming pool. OJ and Marguerite ended their marriage in 1979 because OJ, he was a celebrity and it was hard. They lost Erin, their daughter, and that was hard. The big question that everyone wanted to know was, did OJ ever hurt Marguerite? And in one interview, Marguerite said, if he did, he would have gotten a frying pan upside his head. That wasn't gonna happen to me. Hell yeah. And of course, a considerable deal breaker for any marriage would be cheating. OJ crossed paths with 18-year-old Nicole Brown. While married to his wife Marguerite, OJ had started romantically seeing Nicole Brown, with whom he met while she was working as a waitress in a Beverly Hills nightclub called The Daisy. They began dating while OJ was married to his first wife, and that meant that she would have been pregnant with Erin, the daughter that passed away. Yeah.
We had lived together till June, and we realized it wasn't going to work, but she told me she was pregnant. Geez, what are you, here we are, not, how could you get pregnant, whatever. And I was so depressed, but it was our anniversary the next day. Over the weekend would be our anniversary, so I went into Beverly Hills. I bought her a coat for them to deliver it to her. And I ran into a friend of mine. He said, let's have breakfast. And when we walked in, this vision turned to me and said, where do you want to sit? And I remember thinking, what a gorgeous girl, but I can't deal with this. So 3 days later when I came back, I went back into the Daisy and was having lunch with the owner, and she came back in, and I said, man, I would really like to take this girl out. And he called her over and introduced us and, said, this is one of the good guys.
And you were together from then on?
Well, yeah, I had to take her, before we went to the party, I had to explain to her that I was married. But I wasn't married. It sounded like a line, but after we talked, I think she believed me, and we're together ever since.
Following his retirement from professional football in 1979, OJ transitioned into a successful career as both a sportscaster and an actor. He had already explored acting while still an active athlete.
Hi, I'm OJ Simpson. Now, you may know me as a sportscaster, a commercial pitchman, or an actor, but I also played some pro football a while back, but that was a couple of years ago, a couple of good knees ago, and a couple of million frequent flyer miles ago. But fortunately, not a few pounds ago. That's what I'm here for.
What, feel like Michael Moyer?
That's it.
OJ appeared in television commercials for Hertz Rental Car Company, showcasing himself by leaping over luggage and other obstacles in pursuit of catching a flight. Furthermore, he served as a commentator for Monday Night Football and NFL on NBC. Despite their significant age difference, Nicole and OJ exchanged vows in February of 1985. Following their marriage, Nicole adopted the name Nicole Brown Simpson, and the couple had 2 children together, named Sydney and Justin. So Nicole Brown's sister would come out to suggest that these relationships, like the one we're about to disclose and talk about, that these need to be considered and viewed as potential crimes rather than just abuse. Because like most romantic relationships that go from bad to worse, there was always the better times that were had. And those better times almost always tend to feel good enough to leave us hanging on. Things were toxic and turbulent. And then they just went seriously to dangerous. But like Nicole's sister said, this is more like just dangerous out the gate. After Nicole Simpson lost weight once she gave birth to her children, OJ said that he loved it. Nicole's sister quoted OJ Simpson as saying, "Look at her. She looks great, doesn't she? She's mine." Like Nicole was his possession. Nicole expressed her dissatisfaction in her marriage to her friends and her family, the ones that were really close to her, revealing that OJ had started domestic violence on Nicole. The police were called to their residence in Los Angeles on numerous occasions, including one incident on New Year's Day in 1989 when a fight between the couple resulted in Nicole sustaining injuries such as a split lip, bruises, and a black eye.
I'm responsible for what I did. I got physical. I was wrong. Nicole had admitted that she initiated it. And somehow I came out of all of that because of that night as the poster boy of an abuser.
Nicole had been hiding in the bushes and had been beaten when the police arrived at his Brentwood mansion. "He's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me," she cried while she leapt out of the bushes and she starts running toward the officers. She kept saying, "You never do anything about him. You talk to him and then you leave." She also disclosed that her husband had made threats to end her life by OJ saying, I'll kill you. When OJ was arrested, he said, "The police have been out here 8 times before, and now you're gonna arrest me for this? This is a family matter. What do you want to make a big deal out of it when I can clearly handle it?" OJ pleaded no contest to spousal battery charges. Consequently, he was ordered to complete 120 hours of community service, pay a $200 fine, and serve 2 years of probation. Additionally, he was mandated to donate $500 to a shelter for victims of domestic violence. In an interview with ESPN, OJ downplayed the incident, stating that it was merely a fight in which both parties were at fault, and that no one was seriously harmed. He emphasized that it was not a significant issue and that, obviously, both him and Nicole had moved on with their lives. Nevertheless, their relationship did not get better, and Nicole Brown Simpson ended up filing for divorce in 1992. When OJ had met Nicole years back, it said that OJ asked Nicole to drop out of Saddleback College so she could live with him and he could support her. And he effectively was cutting her away from pursuing a career. Now, back then, it seemed like a really shiny opportunity. But as she needed to break away from him, it became very evident to her and her loved ones that he had weeded her away from everything that she was trying to grow to be as a woman, as an independent human, and that he had taken that opportunity from her. And so breaking away from him would mean that she wasn't going to have a whole lot left because he had control of everything. Now, other times it's pretty normal for the men to go to work and support their wives and their spouses back home to raise the children. Usually when something like that happens, it's to support the spouse and to support your family. But unfortunately, in this situation, I personally didn't feel alongside everyone else that that was OJ's intentions. It just seemed like in reading about Nicole and OJ's turbulent relationship that their situation was more like trying to trap her. So in her filing, she noted this. She said, since OJ Simpson was the breadwinner of the family, she felt the need to do what only he wanted. I've always told OJ what he wants to hear, she said. Friends of OJ and Nicole said that when OJ wasn't around, if by chance he wasn't around, because it was like he was always around, Nicole came off smarter and brighter. When he was around, she acted very tense and afraid. The divorce settlement finalized in October of that year, and she was granted over $430,000 and a monthly child support payment of $10,000 additionally. OJ also gave Nicole a rental property in San Francisco. As Nicole remained devoted to her children and worked to enjoy her newfound independence, she was what feels like, in my opinion, trauma bonding to her ex-husband. But I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. And, people say, oh, they loved each other. It's still quoted, oh, they were so in love. But Nicole had started seeing a guy by the name of Keith. And I'll just let Keith speak for himself. This sounded pretty bad.
She told me about all the violence that predicated us meeting. We actually had numerous instances of confrontation with OJ. Well, it started, I met Nicole in the winter of '92 in Aspen, and I didn't know who she was when I first met her. I didn't really care. She told me that she was divorcing her husband, he was abusive, so she started to fill me in on that kind of thing. She knew I had the restaurants in Los Angeles, so I'd be visiting out there soon after the initial weekend that we met. So we connected immediately upon me arriving to town. And the first night or two, she came to visit one of my restaurants, Metzaluna in Beverly Hills. We had a big Tuesday night event that we did every week. So she brought some friends, and it started instantly. The first night I arrived in town, I went to visit her at her house, and we got 30, 40 nonstop phone calls, hang-ups. So we were convinced we were being watched immediately from that point. A night or two later, when she joined me at Metzaluna in Beverly Hills with some of her girlfriends, OJ showed up almost instantly. Came pulling up in his Bentley, and squealed the tires in front of the restaurant, slammed the door, came barging in right up to our table and slammed his fist down on the table and proclaimed that he was OJ Simpson and she was still his wife. So that was the first instance, and then it was followed by numerous other ones. Every time we went out, he would show up at whatever restaurant or bar. And then there's the famous night that he followed us home. We were unaware that he was outside the house, but we knew that he had followed us that evening. We were at several different places and he showed up at them all. So Nicole just looked at me at one point and said, let's just go home. So we went home. We engaged in some activity in the downstairs living room, unaware he was outside watching us. We found out the next day when he showed up at the house, and her and I were in one of the back rooms, and he burst in the door, got in my face, started threatening and screaming and yelling, and tried to get her alone, which she was standing behind me. I was in between the two of them. So she was holding my hand, and I could feel her trembling. It was a volatile situation, and it could have gone either way. He wanted to be left alone with her, and I wasn't having any of that at that point. I was aware of what had happened in the past, so I was scared for her safety and obviously my own. So we argued for several minutes until she convinced me to wait outside the door, but stay close. She made it very clear, stay within earshot, so he could, read her the riot act as he used to doing. So that was the day after he watched us through the house, and I could hear him screaming, how he watched us through the window and he followed us home. So it was a bad scene.
We had once in a while seen each other. She'd come by the house, and so it wasn't like we didn't have relations in the early part of our separation. So I had run into her, which they tried to say was stalking, because her and some friends were at a opening of a restaurant. I was there with like 16 people, so if I'm stalking you with my crew. We were all there too, And I saw her, and I went over and spoke to her and her group. Then I went out with my group to a party, but on the way home, I'd say, I'll see if she's home, because if she's still up, I don't know how late she stayed out, and, maybe, I can get some. In any event, as I approached her front door, she has a window right along the walkway there. I can hear something, and I can see movement, and when I look, I can obviously see she was involved in something. I didn't know who it was with or what, and I hit the door and left.
When you knocked on the door?
No, I just hit the door.
When you hit the door,
I wanted them to be aware that somebody's around and maybe they'd move or something. That's all. I didn't even look. I just hit the door twice and left. It's funny, I realized when I got home, maybe for the first time since we separated, I slept like a baby. It's weird. It's really weird. I think what you do, you worry so much about something like this happening. That's what had me worried. That's what I didn't want to have. That's what I couldn't picture at night and would make me wake up. And I was reading all of these books about how to heal a broken heart. And from that moment on, I was fine.
The next morning, OJ returned to Nicole's house to confront her in the presence of her lover. Here's how he describes the conversation.
But the next day we talked about it, and that's when we had promised each other when we separated that one of us was going to get involved with anybody, we would alert the other one.
Right.
She said it was a mistake. We had been drinking and da 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 da. And I said, well, why did you tell me that this was the nature of your relationship with this guy?
But again, Nicole seemed like she really loved OJ. That's what she was thinking and feeling. So Nicole and Keith remained friends during this time, and Nicole ends up telling Keith that she wants to get back with OJ. And Keith told her, I was scared. I told her, be careful. But Nicole insisted that OJ had changed, but he hadn't. October 25th of 1993, the kids were in the home, and Nicole had to call the police. Several things had set OJ off, and at this point, he was a very, very jealous and angry man.
Yeah, can you send someone to my house? What's the problem there? Well, my ex-husband or my husband just broke into my house, and he's ranting and raving. Now he's just walked out in the front yard. Has he been drinking or anything? No, but he's crazy. Is he black or Hispanic? Black. What's he wearing right now? Black pants and a golf shirt. You said he hasn't been drinking? No. Did he hit you? No. Did you have a spending order against him? No. What's your name? Nicole Simpson. Your address? 325 Gretna Green Way. Is it a house or an apartment? It's a house. Okay, what's the police out? 911 emergency. Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back. Please. Okay, what does he look like? He's OJ Simpson. I think you know his record. Did you just say something over here? Okay, what is he doing there? He's all about to here. He's throwing me over. Wait a minute, what kind of car is he in? He's in a white Bronco, but first of all, he broke the back door down to get in. Wait a minute, what's your name? Nicole Simpson. Okay, is he the sportscaster or whatever? Yeah. Okay, wait a minute, we're sending the police. What is he doing? Is he threatening you? He's looking going nuts. So what is he saying? Oh, something about some guy I don't know. There's something. I started this shit before, and it's all my fault. And then what am I going to do to fix it on there? Okay, it's all my fault. I did everything before.
After that, Nicole, she was done. She ended up cutting romantic ties once again. On the evening of June 12, 1994, football legend OJ Simpson attended his daughter's dance recital, as did his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. And the reason why I introduce him this way is because even though we're talking about a very angry, possessive, and controlling individual, he was still a celebrity. So he had all the money and all kind of people in his corner at this time. So he ends up going to this dance recital. After the recital, Nicole had dinner with her family and friends at a restaurant called Mezzaluna, where a waiter by the name of Ronald Goldman worked. OJ was clearly made to not be invited. In fact, he was uninvited, basically. Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson had exercised together. They had met for coffee and dinner in the months preceding to their murders. These two people, Ron and Nicole, had become buddies. And, you know, after some time of being around someone that treats you like a bag of trash, and you're around someone that treats you like a human, it hits differently. It's a different flex. It feels good. And so I believe this is one of the reasons why OJ was not invited to dinner and the restaurant, and why she continued to make friends with other men, you know, around her, because they were treating her like the beautiful person that she actually truly was. The pair would ride around in her white Ferrari, and they would go to dance clubs together. Like, she was trying to find her identity at this time. Now, while Ron told others that he was just friends with Nicole, he bragged. He was very proud to be her friend. He said she was very good looking, and he talked about how much fun it was when the two of them would hang out. So they did know each other, but it was said to be a platonic relationship. After the family left the restaurant, Nicole ventured out with her children to Ben & Jerry's before returning to her condominium on Bundy Drive. Meanwhile, OJ ate takeout food from McDonald's with a family friend of his that had actually been staying in his guest house on OJ's estate. Rumors had circulated that OJ had been on drugs at the time of the murder that we're about to talk about. And the New York Post actually reported that this friend that he was hanging out with, this family friend, and OJ, they'd gone to a local Burger King where they met with a drug dealer and they got high. Now, I've heard that they were doing meth, and then I've heard that they were doing cocaine. Either way, if you have temperamental issues like OJ does and you're using that, it's not a good mix. It like inflames your temper. It makes everything worse. And that was also said about his marriage with Nicole, that he was oftentimes very checked out, loaded, and just an angry, intolerable guy. Very, very possessive. On the night of June 12th, OJ was scheduled to board a red-eye flight from Los Angeles International Airport to Chicago, where he was due to play golf the following day at a convention with representatives of the Hertz Corporation, for whom he was the spokesman. The flight was due to leave at 11:45 p.m. A limousine arrived to pick him up around 10:25 p.m. The limousine driver began to buzz the intercom at 10:40 p.m. but got no response. The limousine driver noted that the house was dark, that nobody appeared to be home, and he decided to smoke a cigarette as he made several calls to his boss to try to get in touch with OJ. So you gotta understand this guy, this limousine driver, he's standing outside OJ's house super early, like an hour early, to make sure he properly and timely escorts OJ to the airport so he can take his flight to Chicago. So this guy's smoking a cigarette. He's got nothing better to do than look around and try to, find out what's going on. So he's literally put in a position where he's trying to make sense of everything. He's checking all around him. So he's got his cigarette. At some point, the driver, he noticed a dark, shadowy figure scurry into the home, and the figure looked a lot like it could have been OJ. Remember, OJ is a really strong guy. Like, he's got a special appearance, probably even to his shadow, because he's a pretty tall, kind of buffer looking guy. He was a football player. Later, the walkway used by the shadowy figure would actually end up holding valuable evidence, a bloody glove. OJ would come outside shortly after the shadowy figure went inside, and he would say, "I overslept." Although the night was a cooler night, once OJ was in the limousine, he was sweating, and he said he was hot, and he was like rolling down the windows. The driver also testified that he had loaded 4 luggage bags into the limousine that night. One of those bags was a knapsack that OJ would not let the limo driver touch. He insisted he load it himself. OJ, he's like, "Don't touch this bag. You can help me with that. Don't touch this." A porter at the airport testified as well later that OJ checked only 3 bags onto the plane that night. The knapsack, the bag that OJ would not let his limo driver touch, was later testified as a missing bag. And a witness at the airport later indicated that they saw OJ at the airport before getting on the plane, discarding items from the knapsack into a trash can. So later it was said that this was believed to be the murder weapon, the clothing, and the shoes from a crime scene. And this very night, a crime would happen. The crime would be regarding Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. Going back to the dinner that OJ had not been invited to. After dinner, Nicole's mom realized that she forgot her glasses at the restaurant. So she phoned the restaurant at 9:37 p.m. inquiring about the glasses. Now Ron, knowing Nicole, volunteered to drop them off at Nicole's house once he would end his shift at about 9:50 p.m. that night. Later that evening, a white Akita, a dog, was discovered by a neighbor walking in the neighborhood by itself with bloody paws. Just after midnight, the dog led to a discovery of a brutal crime scene with the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman outside her home. Get ready. Focus, because this next part of this particular crime story is just bizarre. So, the police officer arrives at Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium in Brentwood, California on June 13th of 1994. That the master bathroom was lit with candles. The tub was full and the television was on. A cup of half-melted ice cream was on the downstairs banister, and her children were asleep in their rooms. The murder was brutal. Nicole, only 34 years old, had been stabbed 12 times. Ron Goldman, who was only 25 years old, had been stabbed 25 times. Police had gone to OJ's house and found a trail of blood from his vehicle to the front door, as well as a bloody glove matching one found by Ron Goldman's body back at Nicole Brown Simpson's home. Now, at the time that the limo driver was smoking a cigarette, and he's like, where is this guy? Like, trying to call his boss, trying to get in touch with OJ, waiting on him to take him to the airport. At that time, there was absolutely no vehicle parked outside his house. Also, a neighbor of OJ Simpson's would later testify that they also did not see a white Ford Bronco parked outside OJ's home when Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were killed. When LAPD went to notify OJ of Nicole Brown Simpson's death, the detectives buzzed the intercom for over 30 minutes without a response. They noted OJ's vehicle had been parked in an awkward angle, and that there was blood on the door, which they feared meant that maybe someone's in the house and they're hurt. The detectives would argue they entered the house without a search warrant because, specifically out of fear, someone could have been inside and injured. This is also where they found a blood-stained right-hand glove in the walkway, one very similar to a glove that would fit someone's left hand left by Ron's body at the crime scene. This evidence was determined to be probable cause to issue an arrest warrant for OJ. When OJ was phoned out in Chicago and notified about the crime, OJ sounded very upset, but was oddly unconcerned about the circumstances of Nicole's death. OJ was most concerned if his children had witnessed the crime, instead of concerning himself with asking if his children had even been harmed at all during the time of the crime. OJ would quickly be taken in for questioning. It was noticed that OJ had a cut on his finger that was consistent with where the killer was bleeding from, and asked OJ, "How'd you get that cut on your hand?" The first excuse was that when OJ was in Chicago, he accidentally cut it after learning about Nicole's death. But then it was said by authorities that they had discovered blood in his vehicle. Then OJ said, "Oh, okay, I cut it on June 12th, but totally don't remember how." OJ voluntarily gave some of his own blood for comparison with evidence collected at the crime scene, and then he was released. On June 14th, OJ hired an attorney who would begin building a team of attorneys that would soon be labeled the Dream Team. Suddenly, one of his attorneys by the name of Robert Shapiro said that OJ was seeking treatment for depression. And at that, the DNA test came back positive. But the district attorney's office held off just a little bit longer on charging him for anything until more conclusive results would come back. So the walls are caving in on Mr. Simpson. And of course, he gets the best lawyers in the area, some of which were said to be his friends, to represent him. And he also goes and starts treatment for depression. How about that? On June 17th, detectives recommended that OJ be charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstance of multiple killings after the final DNA results came back. At 8:30 a.m., his attorney Robert Shapiro was told of the news that OJ needed to turn himself in. At 9:30 a.m., OJ was told, and he verbally agreed he would turn himself in. The police agreed to delay OJ's surrender until noon that day to allow him to be seen by a mental health specialist as he was showing signs of suicidal depression. He had updated his will, he had called his mother and his children, and he had written 3 sealed letters, one to his children, one to his mother, and one to the public. Now, the 3 letters that he wrote, he left them behind. And he was supposed to be turning himself in by noon, but at 1:50 p.m. that day, OJ was labeled as a fugitive, and police issued an all-points bulletin for him and an arrest warrant for Al Cowlings. Despite being expected to surrender and confront the charges, OJ took Al, and he chose not to. He was on the run. At 5 p.m., OJ's attorneys went public with a suicide letter written by OJ.
This letter was written by OJ today. To whom it may concern. First, everyone understand I had nothing to do with Nicole's murder. I loved her, always have, and always will. If we had a problem, it's because I loved her so much. Recently, we came to the understanding that for now, we were not right for each other, at least for now. Despite our love, we were different, and that's why we mutually agreed to go our separate ways. It was tough splitting for a second time, but we both knew it was for the best. Inside, I had no doubt that in the future we would be close friends or more. Unlike what has been written in the press, Nicole and I had a great relationship for most of our lives together. Like all long-term relationships, we had a few downs and ups. I took the heat New Year's 1989 because that's what I was supposed to do. I did not plead no contest for any other reason but to protect our privacy, and was advised it would end the press hype. I don't want to belabor knocking the press but I can't believe what is being said. Most of it is totally made up. I know you have a job to do, but as a last wish, please, please, please leave my children in peace. Their lives will be tough enough. Paula, what can I say? You are special. I'm sorry we're not going to have our chance. God brought you to me. I now see, as I leave, you'll be in my thoughts. I think of my life and feel I've done most of the right things. So why do I end up like this? I can't go on. No matter what the outcome, people will look and point. I can't take that. I can't subject my children to that. This way they can move on and go on with their lives. Please, if I've done anything worthwhile in my life, let my kids live in peace from you, the press. I've had a good life. I'm proud of how I lived. My mama taught me to do unto others. I treated people the way I wanted to be treated. I've always tried to be up and helpful. So why is this happening? I'm sorry for the Goldman family. I know how much it hurts. Nicole and I had a good life together. All this press talk about a rocky relationship was no more than was no more than what every long-term relationship experiences. All her friends will confirm that I have been totally loving and understanding of what she's been going through. At times, I have felt like a battered husband or boyfriend, but I loved her.
OJ was in the back seat with a gun as his buddy Al continued the rat race with police chasing them, and then helicopters, and then a captivated media, and then everybody standing on the side of the road, holding up signs for OJ.
He yelled out, "Hey, Simpson's on the TV," and I look up and there's this Bronco thing. And we're thinking, how could this get any worse? How could this get out of control? Because he was supposed to turn himself in and didn't. We'd sent some people out to Kardashian's house, a couple of squad cars with a lieutenant to interview those people. All they could tell us was OJ was here with AC, and next thing we know, they're gone. It was chaos because no one was in control. That's what gets you in any homicide investigation. You need to have control. You need to know what's going on. You need to be able to communicate. And right now, we had absolutely nothing. We knew this guy was running, and all of a sudden, the sheriffs get on the phone. They were behind him. He says he's got a gun. Now we got a big problem. This isn't no longer about wanting to talk to him about a murder. It's wanting him to get that gun and throw the damn gun out the window, get rid of it. Or we're going to have more problems. I don't know what his state of mind is. I don't know. He's moaning like he hasn't slept in a week. When I finally get him on the phone, I never thought he'd pick up, by the way. Well, what does that tell you? It says he wants to talk to somebody. I say, that's good. The main thrust of my conversation is the gun. Okay, if it's a gun, you got to assume it's real. You got to assume it's loaded. You got to assume he can use it. Is he going to use it on himself? Is he going to shoot AC? Is he going to start shooting at the cops that are chasing him? Eventually, is he going to start shooting at all the looky-loos running up to the car when he gets back in Westwood? I don't know. All I care about is the gun. If he goes home or anywhere else and he steps out of that car with a gun, he's going to get nailed. Meanwhile, he's saying, all I do is want to go home. I want to get home. I want to do this. I want to be with Nicole. All this nonsense. I don't know if it's real or not, if he's playing me. It doesn't matter. If he's got a real gun, you play it like he's got a real gun and he's going to use it. Meanwhile, I signal somebody and I get SWAT, get him up to Rockingham. He says he wants to go home. SWAT takes off for Rockingham and they're going to set up at Rockingham in case he goes well. He decides that they're going home. The turnaround is made and he's on his way home. We'll be waiting for him there. But again, if he gets out of the truck with a gun, they're going to drop him. He can't do that. I don't want him to shoot himself. I don't want him to shoot anybody. And he tried to use his family, his kids, his this, his that, and he's just moaning here and moaning there. Is it an act? I don't know. I don't care. We take this all the way to his house, and he keeps picking up the phone. So that tells me, well, maybe we're in good shape with the gun, but you never know. But that's the reason that was conducted in the way that it was.
OJ's former coach, USC football coach John McKay, was connected to speak with OJ. It's said as both men wept, OJ told Coach McKay, "Okay, Coach, I won't do anything stupid. I promise you that." John McKay pleaded to OJ, "My God, man, we love you. We love you, Juice. Just pull over and I'll come out and I'll stand by you all the rest of my life." OJ resisted, and authorities worried over him committing suicide. The chase ended at 8 p.m. at his Brentwood estate. OJ exited the vehicle at 8:50 p.m. with a framed family photo, and he took himself inside for about an hour, as a police spokesman stated that as he spoke to his mother, he drank himself a glass of orange juice, causing reporters to have a laugh.
I think it's time for a tree sweet break.
Me too.
Okay, boss. This is Betrayal Hill where I grew up, and this is Tree Sweet, the orange juice I grew up on. It's rich in natural energy, and the kids, they like to taste the Tree Sweet because it's always naturally sweet. As sweet as an orange right from the tree, right?
Yes, sir.
You ready for another lesson, boss?
All right.
This may come as the ultimate shock to you, but on June 20th, OJ pled not guilty and was held without bail. California Superior Court Judge Kathleen Kennedy Powell ruled on July 7th that there was sufficient evidence to bring OJ Simpson to trial for the murders. At his second arraignment on July 22nd, OJ firmly stated, "Absolutely 100% not guilty." I'm going to cover some key points here in the trial, but I highly suggest that you do your research on it. It was incredibly loaded, very complex, but wow, very powerful, and definitely went down in history as one of the biggest trials in the world. A man named Jose provided store receipts showing that OJ had purchased a 12-inch stiletto knife 6 weeks before the murders. The knife was recovered and determined to be similar to the one the coroner said caused the stab wounds. Tests on the knife determined that an oil used on the new culinary was still present on the knife, indicating that it had never been used. And because Jose sold his story to the National Enquirer for $12,500, the prosecution did not present this evidence at trial. Jill Shively testified to the grand jury that soon after the time of the murders, she saw a white Ford Bronco speeding away from Bundy Drive in such a hurry that it almost collided with a Nissan at the intersection. However, she talked to television, a show called Hard Copy, for $5,000, after which prosecutors declined to use her testimony at trial. Rose Lopez, a neighbor's Spanish-speaking housekeeper, stated on August 18th that she saw OJ's Bronco parked outside his house at the time of the murders. During cross-examination, she was not sure what time she saw OJ's Bronco so suddenly. However, a taped July 29th statement did not mention seeing the Bronco, but it did mention another housekeeper was also there that night by the name of Sylvia. Prosecutors then spoke, claiming the defense offered both the housekeepers $5,000 to say that they both saw the Bronco that night, and they dropped them from the witness list. Defense also sought to show that one or more hitmen hired by drug dealers had murdered Nicole and Ron in pursuit to find Nicole's friend by the name of Faye Resnick. Faye Resnick was a known drug user, failing to pay for her substances. Faye had actually been staying several days with Nicole until she entered rehab just right before the murders had happened. But there was no evidence to support this. OJ requested a speedy trial. Defense and prosecution worked furiously around the clock to prepare their cases. The trial began January 24th of 1995. 7 months after the murders, and it was televised. The Los Angeles Superior Court then decided to hold the trial downtown Los Angeles instead of Santa Monica. It was said due to safety reasons at the Santa Monica courthouse owing to the 1994 Northridge earthquake. The decision resulted in a jury pool that was less educated, had lower incomes, and contained more African Americans. A man by the name of Richard Gabriel, a jury consultant for OJ, stated that jurors who possess a higher level of education and enjoy higher incomes tend to be more inclined toward acknowledging the credibility of DNA evidence and accepting the notion that domestic violence serves as a precursor to homicide. Gabriel noted that African Americans were far more likely than other minorities to be receptive to claims of racially motivated fraud by the police. The prosecution argued that the domestic violence within the Simpson and Brown home within their marriage accumulated in her murder. On the night of the murders, OJ was upset because Nicole was said to be wearing a black dress that was tied on her body at their daughter's recital.
It was almost like she was trying to be a teenager again. Dating all these much younger guys, wearing the shortest, tightest thing she was wearing. And sometimes you think something is inappropriate, but you don't say anything. What am I to say? Tell her what to do,
OJ's then girlfriend was said to have broken up with him around that time, leading him to drive his Bronco to Nicole's residence to get the relationship with Nicole back. But when Nicole denied him, the theory goes that he killed her and that he killed Ron, who came upon the scene. Afterwards, OJ walked to his Bronco and drove home, where he parked and walked into his house. There, he took off his blood-stained clothes, put them in the knapsack, put clean ones on, and left towards the limousine. At the airport, he would discard evidence from the knapsack. It was also stated that OJ denied a polygraph test because he had in the past had lots of dreams of killing Nicole. However, the jury dismissed these claims by Ron Shipp after OJ's defense stated that Ron was just an alcoholic who was testifying against OJ to broaden his acting career. Nicole's sister also testified in witnessing the terror within her sister's marriage to OJ. There was also quite a bit of jury drama as well, but we'll just stay on point here. Los Angeles County Chief Medical Examiner testified on June 14th of 1995 that Nicole Brown's time of death was estimated as between 10 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. The last person that had ever seen OJ before the limousine driver, allegedly, was the family friend that was staying on OJ's estate. This individual's name was Cato Kalin. OJ was not seen again until he answered the intercom at the front door for the limousine driver. So OJ had no alibi for approximately 1 hour and 18 minutes during the time to which the murders took place. The limo driver, finally a name, Alan Park, also testified and said that the Bronco was absolutely not home when he pulled in. Again, as a reminder, he started buzzing for OJ with no Bronco at the home, looking around, noticing his surroundings at 10:40 p.m. that night. Alan's testimony was very important as well because it explained the location of the glove that was found in OJ's home. Then there was a blood trail from the Bronco to the front door, but the glove was actually found on the other side of the house. Alan, the limo driver, said the shadowy figure initially approached the front door before heading down to the southern walkway, which leads to where the glove was found. The prosecution presented a total of 108 exhibits, including 61 drops of blood, of DNA evidence allegedly linking OJ Simpson to the murders. With no witnesses to the crime, the prosecution was dependent on DNA as the only physical evidence linking OJ to this very crime. Regarding OJ's DNA found on blood drops next to the bloody footprints near the victims at the Bundy crime scene, the prosecution stated the probability of an error was 1 in 9.7 billion. OJ's DNA found on the trail of blood drops leading away from the victims toward the back gate at Bundy. The prosecution stated the probability of error was 1 in 200. The DNA found outside the door of OJ Simpson's Bronco that belonged to Nicole Simpson, Ron Goldman, and OJ. The probability of the error in this was 1 in 21 billion. OJ Simpson's DNA found on blood drops leading from the area where his Bronco was parked at his residence to his front door entrance. That was considered evidence. Nicole Brown, Ron Goldman, and OJ Simpson's DNA found on the glove at his home was considered evidence, and OJ and Nicole Brown's DNA found on blood on a pair of socks in OJ's bedroom. The prosecution stated that the probability of error was 1 in 6.8 billion. LAPD criminalist and hair fiber expert Susan Broadbank testified on June 27th of 1995. The FBI special agent and fiber expert Doug Diedrich testified on June 29th of 1995 to the following findings. The fibers from the glove found at OJ's home were microscopically similar to the one found at the crime scene. Both of the victims, the two gloves, and the blue knit cap worn by the killer had hair consistent with OJ Simpson. The hair in the blue knit cap worn by the killer was embedded into the seams, indicating that it was there from being worn repeatedly. In other words, it couldn't be planted. Dark blue cotton clothing fibers were found on both victims. The video from the dance recital that OJ Simpson attended earlier that night shows him wearing a similarly colored shirt. Kato Kalin testified that OJ Simpson was still wearing that shirt when they got home from McDonald's, but was not anymore when he answered the door for the limousine driver Alan. The police searched his home, but the shirt was never found. Hair consistent with Ron Goldman was found on Nicole Brown, and clothing fibers consistent with Nicole Brown was found on Ron Goldman. This supported the prosecution's theory that the assailant killed Nicole Brown first, then Ron Goldman, and afterwards returned to Nicole to cut her throat. The hair consistent with Nicole Brown that was found on the Rockingham glove was torn, which also supports the prosecution's claim that the killer grabbed Nicole by her hair to cut her throat. Fibers that were only used in 1993 to 1994 model year Ford Bronco, the same one that OJ owns, were found on both victims, the knit cap, and both gloves. The glove found at OJ's home that belonged to the murderer had hair and clothing fibers consistent with OJ, with Nicole Brown, and with Ron Goldman, as well as fibers from a 1993 to a 1994 Ford Bronco, as well as Nicole Brown's Akita dog. On June 19th, FBI shoe print expert William testified that the bloody shoe prints discovered at the crime scene and inside OJ's Bronco were created by a rare and expensive pair of Italian shoes. He confirmed that the shoes were a size 12, matching OJ Simpson's shoe size, and were exclusively at Bloomingdale's. Only 29 pairs of that specific size were sold in the United States, with one of them being purchased at the time at the same store where OJ Simpson frequently shops for shoes. It was also stated, despite 2 sets of footprints at the crime scene, only one perpetrator was involved, as all footprints were made by the same shoes. During cross-examination, it was proposed that the killer intentionally wore shoes of the incorrect size, a claim to which FBI shoe print expert William proposed as absolutely ridiculous and promptly dismissed this. OJ Simpson denied ever owning a pair of those ugly-ass shoes. Bloomingdale's employee Samuel Poser testified he remembered showing OJ those shoes, but unfortunately there was no store record of him purchasing them. The defense team's reasonable doubt theory was summarized as compromised, contaminated, and corrupted in their opening statements. They contended that the DNA proof against OJ Simpson was tainted due to the mishandling of the criminalists by the names of Dennis and Andrea during the evidence collection phase, and that the DNA of the real killers had completely disappeared from the evidence samples. Subsequently, the evidence was compromised by the LAPD crime lab by a criminalist named Colin, and OJ's DNA from his reference vial was transferred to all but 3 exhibits. The remaining 3 exhibits were allegedly planted by the police and therefore tainted by police misconduct. The defense also raised doubts about the timeline, asserting that the murders occurred around 11 p.m. that night. A physician by the name of Robert testified on July 14th of 1995 that OJ was not physically capable of carrying out murders due to chronic arthritis and old football injuries. The prosecution produced an exercise video produced a few weeks before the murders that demonstrated OJ was nothing short of frail. A forensic pathologist by the name of Michael testified that the murders happened closer to 11 p.m., which is when OJ Simpson had an alibi. Michael then claimed that Ron Goldman remained conscious and fought with his assailant for at least 10 minutes with a severed jugular vein, pushing into the time frame that OJ had his alibi. However, after the trial, Michael said that testifying for OJ Simpson was a mistake, as his reputation and credibility never recovered and his clientele for his consulting practice vanished. Critics claimed that Michael knowingly gave false testimony in order to collect a $100,000 retainer. It's noted that Ron Goldman's blood was also found inside OJ's Bronco, despite Ron never having been near or inside OJ's vehicle. Defense was saying that evidence was not collected properly because the police were sloppy in collecting and preserving it from the crime scene. There were admissions of errors on collecting of the evidence, such as not always changing gloves when handling evidence items, packaging and storing the evidence items using plastic bags rather than paper bags as recommended, and storing them in a police van, which was not refrigerated for up to 7 hours after collection. It was argued that this would degrade all of the real killer's DNA and create cross-contamination in the LAPD crime lab. Prosecution would come back to fight this, stating errors made by authorities would not change these results. They noted that all of the evidence samples were testable and that most of the DNA testing was done at the 2 consulting labs and not at the LAPD crime lab, where contamination supposedly happens. The prosecution denied that contamination happened in the LAPD crime lab as well because the result of the mixture of a real killer's DNA with OJ Simpson's DNA was not probable because OJ Simpson's DNA was the only one that was present. The contamination claim was made by microbiologist John, who testified on August 2nd of 1995 that forensic PCR DNA matching is not reliable and the LAPD crime lab has a substantial contamination problem. John believed that any DNA matches to OJ were planted by the police. Defense believed that their client OJ had been framed, as they came up with many theories on how this happened, with numerous people who were involved within the lab and law enforcement creating a theory that they all plotted against OJ. Backgate with blood, planted. Socks, planted. Bronco, blood planted. But the glove. What about the bloody glove? Another framed theory. Prosecution's like, another one. This is another theory. They came up with their theories. On June 15th of 1995, OJ was asked to try on the gloves. The prosecution had earlier decided against asking OJ Simpson to try them on because they had been soaked in blood from OJ, Nicole, and Ron, and they had been frozen and unfrozen several times. Instead, they presented a witness who testified that Nicole had purchased a pair of these gloves that were at the murder scene in the same size in 1990 at Bloomingdale's for OJ, along with a receipt and a photo of OJ earlier wearing that same type of glove. The leather gloves appeared too tight for OJ Simpson to put on easily, especially over the latex glove that he was wearing underneath. OJ Simpson was accused of acting when he appeared to be struggling to put on the gloves, but defense replied, "I don't think he can act out the size of his hands." The defense argued for the famous phrase, "If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit." The prosecution contended that the gloves had shrunk due to being soaked in the victim's blood. Richard Rubin, a former vice president of the glove manufacturer, actually testified on September 12th of 1995, confirming that the gloves had indeed shrunk. A new pair of identical gloves were presented, which fit OJ Simpson when he tried them on. Closing arguments went out with a bang, but at 10:07 a.m. on Tuesday, October 3rd, 1995, OJ Simpson was acquitted on both counts of murder.
California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
The jury arrived at the verdict by 3 p.m. on October 2nd, after 4 hours of deliberation. An estimated 100 million people worldwide watched or listened to the verdict's announcement. Later, Nicole and Ron's families sued OJ Simpson. He was found liable for damages in the wrongful death of Ron Goldman and battery of Nicole Brown. A $33.5 million civil judgment was lodged against OJ. But you know, in 2007, OJ went to prison anyway. September 13th of 2007, he was involved in a robbery at gunpoint. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 9 years. Then he was released back into society by 2017. Some people really didn't realize that Nicole was suffering in her marriage with domestic violence and mental abuse the way that she was, because people said they saw Nicole as a strong, honorable person and did not truly understand what OJ had been putting her through for all those years. In fact, at Nicole's funeral, OJ showed up. Nicole's mother actually ended up spending a lot of years beating herself up over the glasses. She actually said that she had a moment of premonition where when she was gonna go get the glasses, she fell into this really weird feeling like something's wrong with this. And she questioned even getting the glasses in the first place. Now, after all was said and done, Nicole actually had multiple journal entries. She says the first time that OJ had beat her was in 1978, and that OJ had battered her during sex, as well as pummeling her for hours, ripping off her clothes, and smashing her car in with a baseball bat over a period of 16 years.
You write about the night in 1984 with the baseball bat.
You know, I don't know why this has become such a big deal. This is what bothered me with the media and these stories is I hadn't committed to a wedding date. I think I got engaged, but then I'm do what most guys do, you know.
You put it off.
I'm telling you, well, we'll get married maybe next summer or something. And she had come home, and we were talking about it, and we went out front like we often did, and we was talking about what it was. And I was sitting on the front of this, it was actually my car, but I had bought it for her. And I had a bat between my legs, and as we're talking, it's bouncing off the tire, and we're just talking. And at one point, it hits the rim, and she says, "If you damage that, you're gonna have to pay for it." And I go, "Well, if I pay for that, I guess I have to pay for this too." And I kind of hit the front of her car, you know. So she went in the house. I don't know what she did when she went in the house, but I mean, it's my car. I pay for everything. I pay for everything around here, right?
She knew he had a volatile temper. But Nicole Brown married OJ anyway, hoping that he would mellow once they started a family.
The shocking diary entries were found stashed in a safety deposit box alongside photographs of Nicole's injuries and apology letters from OJ. The documents were dismissed as hearsay by a judge during the original trial. I think it's only fair, naturally, to mention that Ron's family was completely destroyed over his death as well.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
It was the dramatic end to the trial of the century.
Upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson,
a young Kim Goldman, distraught by OJ Simpson's acquittal.
I wasn't thinking of anybody but my brother, and in some ways feeling like we let him down.
Where are you 25 years later in grieving your son?
I think for me, it's every day for 25 years has been a day without Ron there, to not be able to see him growing and fulfilling his dreams. Ron would be 50 now. And I can't even fathom that makes sense to me.
Kim says her big brother was her protector.
My dad raised my brother and I from when we were 3.5 and 6, and he was a single dad. My brother and I just always knew we could rely on each other.
Every picture I have of them in my mind is the two of them together, holding hands or together in some format. That was who they were, and it never changed.
What was that moment like for you when they broke the news to you that it was your son who had died alongside Nicole Brown?
We found out in the most bizarre way. It was a phone call from the coroner's office, basically saying, "Did you hear about the death of Nicole Brown?" And I said, "What does that have to do with me?" And they said, "Well, your son was the other victim." And, I was shocked, overwhelmed.
You felt it was really crucial that you break the news to Kim.
Well, I didn't want Kim to hear from the news or from anyone else. Sadly, I had to be the one to tell her.
He said, "Did you hear anything on the news today?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he just basically said that Ron died. I remember just falling to the ground, kind of screaming and crying.
Fred Goldman's only son was gone.
I said, "Well, do I have to come down and identify?" "No, we know it's him. We had a, They hung up, and Patty and I stood in the kitchen hugging each other, crying our eyes out.
Fred's life had suddenly, in the cruelest possible way, lurched off the tracks.
Your life becomes a new norm, a new normal, because the previous normal instantly goes away. Your dreams and your thoughts about what your child, in this case, is going to be doing with their life next year, next week, who their wife is going to be, what their kids are going to look like, all gone.
Is there a lesson that you've learned?
The only thing I can say is that time does heal some, doesn't heal everything, but time gives you the opportunity to have, as I said before, a new normal in your life. And the new normal may not be what you wanted it to be, but it's going to be your new normal.
Now, 2 final things to note here as we close out. OJ did end up writing a book called If I Did It, and it's supposed to be some kind of reenactment of the actual crime.
Well, I got a call from Judith Regan, the publisher, and she told me she had this project and asked me to come in and talk about it. And I really didn't understand what the project meant. It was a hypothetical confession. And I said I didn't want to be in business with OJ, at which point the attorneys sent over some documentation showing that the deal was in fact with OJ's children. And I thought about it, And as a former journalist, it was a little bit, it was hard to resist, the opportunity to sit in a room with a man that I knew was, I was convinced was a murderer, was hard to pass up.
You actually told him that. You told him you thought he was guilty of murder. How did he react?
Well, there was one point where he said, we'd spent a few days together by this point, and he said, now that you know me a little better and maybe even like me a little bit, do you still think I'm guilty? And I said, OJ, I'm sorry. I thought you were guilty when I flew down here, and I still think you're guilty. And he exploded, and he cursed me out and stuff. And then he started laughing. And he thought, it was very amusing. He wanted to put a little scare in me, but it wasn't an act of bravery on my part. Basically, at that point, if I had lied to him, and I think he would have been able to tell that I was lying, it would not have served the book, and it would have kind of just sort of ruined the days we had left to work together.
I'm struck by, as you tell that story, by the two sides of OJ Simpson I think we all saw, which was on the one hand, the charmer who thought he could charm you. Now that we know each other, you probably maybe even like each other, what do you think? Do you think I did it? And then on the other hand, the explosive anger when you said, yeah, I think you did.
Right. Well, one of the things that was never, some people know that this is what happened, but when the Goldmans went on national television and they basically decried this horrible project, and eventually Rupert Murdoch got tired of hearing it, and he killed the book and the scheduled interview. And at that point, I thought it was over, and, to me, it was not a great loss. And 2 weeks later, I get a call from a book agent in San Francisco, and she says the Goldmans now have the rights to the book. Mm-hmm. They, under the civil settlement, the court decided to award them the book since it has some financial value. So the Goldmans asked me, after killing the book, if I would be good enough to write a prologue for the book to put everything into perspective and help them get it published. So I did what they asked. I felt terrible about their loss, and I just did what they asked, and the book ended up on the New York Times bestseller list.
It ended up on the bestseller list. The cover has the word "if" in tiny letters, and "I did it" in huge letters. So the Goldmans, in the end, I feel like got a little bit of the last word there. You've said you thought that OJ murdered Nicole not once but twice. What did you mean by that?
Well, he murdered her in down the alley, and then in the course of writing the book, it was amazing. When we started out, he talked about this wonderful young woman he met. She was a waitress in a Beverly Hills coffee shop, and it was a wonderful love story, and he couldn't say enough nice things about her. But as we dug a little bit deeper, and he started getting into like the allegations of abuse and the fact that the media turned him into the poster boy for wife abuse, he basically began to murder her character. Now, in normal circumstances, if I'm working with somebody who, brings up things that are kind of unsavory or unflattering, we'll talk about it. We'll say, do you think this belongs in the book? But in OJ's case, I said, well, go ahead and hang yourself. So I basically took down what he said about her, and judging from the way he described her, you get a pretty good idea of the kind of person he was.
Yeah, you told Newsweek you were shocked at how unaware Simpson was of how terrible he was coming across in that book.
Absolutely. It was amazing. And, never at any point in the time we were together was there even an iota of remorse or regret.
And finally, on April 10th of 2024, OJ lost his battle to prostate cancer and he passed away. So what do you guys think about the case of OJ? What do you think about him no longer walking the earth? Are you feeling like we live in a little bit of a safer world now that someone like him with a lot of power, money, and anger and vengeance, that can commit a murder, allegedly, and even die, just take it wherever his afterlife was awaiting him? What do you guys think about that? Do you guys really think that his soul was spared? For real? I mean, wow, I don't know, you know? But it was kind of crazy on April 10th to wake up. It shocked me because I'm like, wow, he met our creator today. He actually went to the other side and got judged. Is that something that you believe in? Let me know your thoughts on the entire case and what you think became of OJ, just how the whole thing made you feel, but keep it appropriate as, you know, there were victims involved as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was good to see you. Thanks for giving me a week off, and I will be seeing you for another case. I'm Chelsea J. Stay safe out there. Crime Light out.